I never thought one moment of careless pride could destroy everything I once held dear. At a dinner surrounded by friends, I made a joke at my husband's expense. Everyone laughed, and for a fleeting second, I felt powerful, confident, even admired. But when I looked at him, his face was pale, his eyes filled not with anger, but with a kind of sadness I didn't understand. He didn't argue. He didn't lash out. He simply stood, pushed his chair back, and walked out the door. That was the last time I ever saw him. At first, I told myself he'd be back, maybe after cooling down. But hours turned into days, and days into weeks. And then I realized, betrayal isn't always about lies or infidelity. Sometimes, it's about taking love for granted until it finally breaks. Our story begins in a quiet suburban neighborhood where life seemed predictable and almost painfully ordinary. My husband, Daniel, and I had been married for nearly 7 years. On the surface, we appeared to be the kind of couple people envied: stable jobs, a modest home, and a marriage without scandal. Yet beneath the smiles and carefully curated images, our relationship carried small cracks, tiny fractures we ignored in the rush of daily life. Daniel was steady, thoughtful, and quietly ambitious. He worked long hours at an architecture firm, often overlooked for promotions despite his undeniable talent. I noticed it, but I rarely said anything. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I assumed his patience would one day be rewarded. My own career in marketing thrived faster. I was promoted, celebrated, invited to speak at conferences. While I enjoyed the recognition, part of me also began to measure our worth as a couple by the way others viewed us. Slowly, without realizing it, I began to care more about appearances than substance. At gatherings, I leaned into humor, often using Daniel as the punchline, gentle at first, but progressively sharper. Friends laughed, I laughed, and Daniel smiled weakly. I mistook his silence for indifference, not knowing it was a wound that deepened each time. There were moments when I caught a flicker of pain in his eyes, especially when jokes touched on his career struggles or his quiet demeanor. But I brushed it aside, convincing myself he was tough enough to handle it. After all, wasn't teasing a sign of affection? That's what I told myself, even as his spirit seemed to retreat further behind walls I couldn't see. The dinner that would change everything was supposed to be a celebration. My colleagues had gathered at a trendy restaurant, and I insisted Daniel join despite his reluctance. I wanted to show off the man behind my success, believing his presence would complete the picture of our perfect life. He agreed, though I could tell he felt out of place. What happened that night wasn't the first time I mocked him publicly, but it was the sharpest, the cruelest. Surrounded by laughter and clinking glasses, I made a cutting remark about his stalled career, disguising it as a harmless joke. The table erupted in laughter. For one moment, I basked in the glow of attention. And then silence from Daniel. He looked at me with an expression I'll never forget, not anger, not embarrassment, but an aching sorrow. He excused himself, stood up, and walked away. I thought he was stepping outside for air. I thought he'd come back. But when the night ended and I searched for him, he was gone. His phone went unanswered. His car was missing. And just like that, the life I knew unraveled. The first night, I told myself he needed space. The second night, I convinced myself he was punishing me, making me worry so I would apologize more sincerely when he returned. By the end of the first week, panic settled in. Clothes were missing from his side of the closet. A few personal belongings, his passport, some savings, and his laptop were gone too. I reported him missing, only to discover he had left deliberately. The police said no crime was involved. He was an adult, free to disappear if he chose. That was when fear shifted into shame. Because deep down, I knew why he left. And worse, I knew it wasn't the joke alone, it was years of tiny betrayals. Years of me diminishing him piece by piece until there was nothing left to hold him. Friends reached out, some with sympathy, others with judgment. A few admitted they had noticed how I treated him at times, but no one had ever said anything. It was easier to laugh along than to intervene. That truth stung more than I expected. It meant my cruelty had been visible all along, and yet I was too blinded by pride to see it. I began retracing his steps, searching for clues. His colleagues told me he had grown distant in the weeks before leaving. He'd spent long hours sketching designs no one would ever see, pouring his creativity into notebooks he never shared. When I visited his office, I found one of those notebooks tucked into his desk drawer. Flipping through the pages, I saw breathtaking architectural visions, bridges, homes, entire communities, ideas brimming with hope and humanity. My throat tightened. He wasn't a man without ambition. He was a man whose dreams I had mocked into silence. As the weeks turned to months, whispers began to circulate. Some said he had moved abroad, starting fresh where no one knew him. Others suggested he might have joined a non-profit project overseas. One rumor claimed he was working in underprivileged communities, using his skills to design shelters for those society ignored. I couldn't confirm any of it, but I clung to the possibility that he had found a purpose beyond the pain I caused. What tormented me most wasn't just his absence, it was the reflection of myself I was forced to face. I saw how my actions mirrored broader injustices in the world, how easy it is to dismiss the quiet, the overlooked, the ones who don't demand recognition. In mocking Daniel, I had echoed the same injustice he faced at work, the same dismissal he felt in a society that rewards loud ambition over quiet integrity. The climax came in the form of a letter. Months after his disappearance, an envelope arrived with no return address. The handwriting was unmistakably his. My hands trembled as I opened it, my heart racing between hope and dread. The letter was short, barely 2 pages. He wrote that he wasn't angry, nor did he hate me. But he couldn't return to a life where his worth was measured in laughs at his expense. He wrote of the humiliation he had endured, not from strangers, but from the one person who was supposed to protect him. Betrayal, he wrote, is not always about breaking vows. Sometimes it's about being unseen, unheard, and unvalued by the person you trusted most. He explained that he had found work in another city, dedicating his skills to building community centers for marginalized groups. For the first time in years, he felt useful, respected, and alive. "Do not look for me," he ended. "This is not revenge. This is survival." I read the letter again and again, each word cutting deeper than the last. He wasn't coming back. Not out of spite, but because he had finally chosen himself over me. In that moment, the weight of my betrayal became unbearable. It's been years since that night, but the memory remains as vivid as ever. I still live in the same house, though it feels emptier than it ever did before. Friends moved on, colleagues forgot, and life resumed its rhythm, but mine never did. Every corner of the home reminds me of what I lost, not because of fate, but because of choices I made. I often revisit his notebook, the one filled with his sketches. It's the closest I have to hearing his voice now. Sometimes I imagine him somewhere far away, standing proudly before a building he designed, surrounded by people who appreciate the man I failed to see. In those daydreams, he is happy. And that thought is the only comfort I allow myself. The betrayal I committed wasn't a single joke, nor even that one night at the restaurant. It was the gradual erosion of respect, the slow burn of belittlement, the small daily choices to elevate myself at his expense. I thought betrayal was something dramatic, an affair, a broken promise. But I learned the hard way that betrayal can also be silence where there should have been support, laughter where there should have been love. If there's one lesson I've carried from all of this, it's that respect is the backbone of every relationship. Love can survive hardship, distance, even failure, but it cannot survive disrespect. Once trust is broken, once dignity is stripped, it rarely finds its way back. Sometimes I wonder what might have happened if I had chosen differently that night, or the dozens of nights before. If I had celebrated him instead of mocking him, defended him instead of diminishing him. Would he still be here? Would we have built the life we once dreamed of together? I'll never know. And maybe that's the final cruelty of betrayal. Not only does it take away the person you love, but it leaves you forever haunted by the version of yourself you could have been, if only you had chosen better. So, I leave you with this question. How many small betrayals do we commit every day, without realizing the cost until it's too late? Because sometimes it isn't the storm that ends a marriage, it's the quiet erosion of love, one careless laugh at a time.